Teaching While Queer is a podcast for LGBTQIA+ teachers, administrators, and anyone who works in academia to share their stories. Hi, my name is Bryan Stanton, a queer theater educator in San Antonio, Texas. Each week, I bring you stories from around the world centered on the experiences of LGBTQIA folks in academia. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and enjoy Teaching While Queer. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Teaching While Queer. I am your host, Bryan Stanton. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with Danielle. Hi, Danielle. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing excellent. Thank you so much for having me on this amazing
thanks
program.
for being here. I really appreciate it. So before we get started, we were having this pre-show talk, and you had mentioned that you did not want to disclose your sexual orientation. And I think disclosure is such a big thing right now because just the environment of education can be really scary at times. So can you talk a little bit about your tasks and the things that you do to make sure that you are always feeling safe in your workplace?
Oh yeah, that's a good question and a great topic. Because I'm also a part of different organizations like Essex County LGBTQ committee. I do a lot of volunteer work in New Jersey and for NJA, and so it's a topic we talk about. A lot of new teachers that are coming in, and it's just related to the environment in terms of a lot of the kids come from different cultures, come from different backgrounds, and especially with families and parents and that sort of thing. And I know it's been kind of a heavy topic, especially what's going on in Florida. So I was just there recently. But in terms of how the classroom is as a setting in my classroom at the school, it's open to everybody. I have a safe space posters like all over my wall in terms of just equality, the content, and as a filmmaking digital media teacher, I show a lot of LGBTQ content. I have students that are as well in the classroom. So I make that welcoming for, the students, because I always feel like, as a teacher, it's, they're the kind of the stars of the whole classroom, and you're like there being a service as a teacher. So I try my best to kind of just, be a person advocate for them, versus the other way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's so interesting because I think I've seen a meme come up the last couple of years that pride is for everyone, including those who may still be in the closet. In that, and I've talked about this on a couple of episodes because the wonderful Dr. Lulu mentioned this, but the idea of inviting in, you don't have to share your story with everybody. You get to choose who you share your story with. And so I think that it's such an important time because I think representation can look like lots of things. It can look like the person who has a bunch of rainbow flags and is very loud and proud, like myself. Or it could look like being someone who represents the community in a subtle way and is there supporting students regardless and doesn't feel the need to necessarily fly out of the closet, if that makes sense. So thank you for that, and thank you for the interesting take on that. So let's dive a little bit back. Let's take a trip back in time. What was it like for you as a queer student?
Yeah, oh my gosh, this is way back because I'm 38. I'm going to be 39 in October. So I was a very shy, student. Growing up and everything, I had a very small pool of friends. I lived in a pretty much predominantly white community in Oakland, New Jersey, a really small town. And it was just, with pretty much in terms of the population, it was just me and my family. We only had a couple of, minority families living in Oakland at the time, but it's a lot more diverse now. I was going through a lot of things, just kind of feeling as a loner in my own, during that time. I was kind of I was very much into comic books, drawing, illustrations. So I did a comic book called The Perfect Life cartoon about this character moving from Jersey to, California. And I just had a lot of aspirations, just dreams of going out there in the West Coast. I ended up doing that. But in terms of, getting involved in different things or activities, I didn't, my small group of friends really were very welcoming to me, and they still are. I'm still friends with some of the folks that I knew. Rebecca Renovitz, who's like my, childhood friend from like how many years now. Um, but terms versus how it is, now is much different. I mean, in terms of LGBTQ, they didn't even have a GSA. I mean, at that time, so it was kind of like, and it was so many like anti, LGBTQ type of thing, church in terms of that, because especially my family, very all grew up, in the church and that sort of thing. So you kind of definitely feel like a isolation, especially with that. But when I went out to college in San Francisco, which I went out to school for animation and visual effects. I mean, I was exposed to everything. Like I felt like I was a part of a family, and and meeting a lot of different people. So that kind of was my element, during that time. But I would say the biggest advocate for me was my brother, who is an out professional. He lives out in San Jose, works in television and film, and so that's kind of why I went into that same journey with filmmaking, and so yeah, it's having that one outlet in your family, makes you feel, welcome and that sort of thing. And when he is older than me, he's in his early 40s, and what he kind of experienced in terms of that, it was like a lot of hate, in terms of LGBTQ community, and he was able to battle through it, through the working in television and things like that. So yeah, that's kind of my journey through that. And with me, it was very late in life, in terms of going into education. It's funny how it kind of goes, full circle. My mom was in education for 25 years. So I felt like, during that time period, being a shy student, and as a teacher now, I kind of gravitate to that, folks in the classroom, and I help them with their aspirations and their dreams, and focus on that. And a lot of the students I worked with graduated years ago, and I still keep in contact with them. A lot of folks, students that are in the LGBTQ community, and trying to help them get their start. So yeah, that's my
I love that. We're like, I'm about a month older than you, whatever the date is.
Oh,
And
that's
so,
great.
yeah, during the time I was the person who started our GSA my senior year, so like they weren't as populated as they are now. I also think about this a lot because I have mixed race children. My 3 older kids are all from the same family. They are Mexican American. My youngest is black. And so when we're like out doing things, or for instance, we were at a cheer competition today, she is the one black person in her cheer group, right? And then we watch other groups where it's like an entire black cheer squad, and I'm like, man, I wish for that for you one day. Like I hope to get us to a place where there is much more diversity, so that she has people to not only look up to, like having adults to look up to, but just people to connect with that will have shared experiences. Because I can imagine, and I talked about this again, Dr. Lulu, she's a wonderful person, but she's Nigerian, right? And so she was explaining just how toxic it can be for a young black person to have to come out, and how isolating that could be. And so I imagine that in an environment where not only are you a racial minority, but you're also in a sexual minority, that's got to be doubly difficult. So I can only imagine the things that like your brother had gone through when it was time for him to come out, because just hearing about how toxic the masculinity, I guess, can be in the community. So yeah, I don't know where that was going, but yeah, I just I'm gonna edit this out. Anyway, let's talk a little bit about what it's like for you now as a queer educator.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's, I have to say, during this past, how many years, this is my 5th year teaching. it's been great. I mean, believe me, I've learned so much from even the kids in the classroom, and even looking back at myself too. And it helps me want to do more advocacy work and being out there and helping out with the community. And they're kind of like my, I get my my energy from, and yeah, because like just like other kids are now, it's just like everybody's out. They're like, they're proud, and in terms of high school and that sort of thing. And yeah, like you said before, the school district that I teach in, it's pretty much like 60% like Hispanic population is growing, over the years, and the other half is black, pretty much. I mean, we don't have any other, I don't think, any white families or anything like that, or students in the population there. So yeah, they go through so much, challenges, even economic challenges, things that they face. I have students that had family members, in terms of being killed during gun violence in the community, and the students having to go to class the next day. It's like over the past how many years, students were on suicide watch that were in the LGBTQ community. And they would reach out to me, and I'm like, not a guidance counselor, just like a teacher helping out, because they feel more comfortable, talking with me on certain things, or even in the classroom, and I always just try my best to, keep that door open for them. Because if I was that way, especially as a young student, I would want that door open to me. The school that I went to, especially, was all great. I remember the time with my guidance counselor at the time at the high school was like telling my mom at the time, like, oh, Danielle's, going to be just, good enough to be like working at the post office, whatever. Like, that's basically what they said. And it was terrible. And my mom was like, had to talk to the principal, and like, she was involved in a lot of stuff, community stuff in in Oakland. And it's like, now fast forward, as a teacher, and I'm in this position, I'm like, you know what, I'm going to keep this door open for them. Any, need a recommendation letter or anything like that, I'm there for them, because, yeah. So, in terms of, yeah, just, other advocacy, work, I'm also part of Out Montclair organization. One of the board members there. Yeah, and Queer 26 is in California. They have for educators like workshops. I'm a part of the board as well, and doing some classes for them as well, soon. And so yeah, it's like the past couple of years have just been like, you know what, I want to do any opportunity that comes, in my direction. I love to help out, and
Yeah, I love that. Wow, the audacity of that teacher talking to your mom.
Right. It's like, but it was like, how many years later that they've probably been like, suspended or whatever. But now it's like totally different. It's like more open, especially with GSAs and support, and like.
It's so interesting because there's so much pressure to like, the pressure on kids to like figure out what you're gonna do, and then for someone to be like, this person is only good enough for the post office, like.
Yeah, I remember. I'm like, what? And my mom's like, she's originally from New York, Bronx, New York, and everything. Like, there's like, no, I'm gonna say something. So, but yeah.
That's wild. I once had a college professor who was like, you should tailor all of your writing towards enterprise, since 90% of you will be working there when you graduate. And I was like, I'm dropping this class. Thank you. Have a nice day.
That's right.
Just the audacity. Like, how are people saying this and it's okay? It's not. That's why things have changed. I love it. So, as an educator, have you had any experiences working with queer students in your space?
Oh my gosh, that's a good. It's been every year. I have a student right now that I work with, and he's 19. He's graduating this year. He wants to go, I believe, into makeup. Here, like, he kind of is going through a transition. One minute he was like talking about he wants to be a makeup artist. Now, since he was working on set with us as a PA, he was a wardrobe assistant on the Click series that I'm helping out with as a producer and he, was like, oh, I want to go into acting, I want to look at some, acting classes or, schools. So I've been helping him with that. And yeah, but just over the years, every student that I've worked with that is a part of the community, I try my best as an educator to help them with whatever capacity or whatever medium they want to go into. Excuse me, go into. That might throw And yeah, and like even with Josiah, using his name, and other students, I try my best to kind of be an advocate, for them, because the biggest thing is like, with the economy and the recession, is getting a lot of these kids, jobs, a lot of high school students, getting them into the workforce, and getting them their start when they go out to college. So I want to try my best to, prepare them, for that.
That's awesome. Do you ever have situations where students either are intentionally or unintentionally homophobic in your space?
Oh yeah. What's it called? But a lot of times I correct them. I say, "Look, guys, we don't use any type of words like that. Even like content, even I show in class that are like, like high school dramas, whatever, like trailers that I'll show that might have like LGBTQ characters. They might say, something. But I truly believe is like the more that we show more content, LGBTQ content, making just a space more comfortable for everybody in that room. And then when teachers advocate for the LGBTQ students and, in that setting, they learn through that. A lot of this, the folks that are like anti whatever, then they're like, oh, wow, even with me being an educator, but like before I even say, how my sexual orientation, is whatever, I want them to get to know me first, I think, as a whole, because it's kind of a cool effect, because they're like, oh, they're so used to like thinking of like stereotypes and all this other stuff, and they don't realize that we're just like you. There's nothing like written order for or whatever, and the same content and shows that we watch is everything is all universal. And that's the sad thing that we have. Not so much like I noticed in white communities, it's more like progressive and everything like that. It's a lot of GSAs, organizations, but the Black communities is that I feel like that is the community that we still need to kind of work on. It's such a hard thing, because I feel like we go through a lot of the stuff in terms of racism and things like that, economic issues and things, and it's like then you have that element, and then and you have to, especially the students with parents that are, it's all caught up with that. But I feel like if we kind of have a setting, a safe space setting for everybody, and even with the kids and showing content in the classroom, I feel more educators need to do that in other classrooms. I noticed that a lot of teachers don't, they're a little bit resistant. And I think that could be a part of the problem as well, and getting that type of bias, nature, out of their heads in terms of that, or
Yeah.
for
What would you
students.
like to see? I mean, if you were to provide just some feedback to the Black community, the Black queer community, like what are the steps? What would you like to see that would be helpful to your students who might be struggling? Like even if you think about like a specific students, like what do your students need? And then we can maybe expand that to that community.
Oh, so like I feel like the kids are so the such innocent ones in this whole category, because they're more open, especially the content they're exposed to nowadays. I think it's like the teachers, the adults that need that type of education. I think it's sad to say it, but in terms of like even we talk about pronouns, we talk about being respectful to students, in the classroom. I don't see a lot of workshops, I feel like, for education, for educators at the high schools, that talk about that type of topic, because that also relates to bullying and issues happening out, that spiral. I was just watching the CBS Sunday Morning, and just like as a wrap up, but yeah, I think that's a part of the problem. Like if a history teacher is starting to add LGBTQ history into part of their curriculum, and if a science teacher is starting to do that, and like everything, that will change the whole landscape for the kids, and what they learn in the classroom. I think that would take away the anti LGBT, and just the whole stereotype in the mindset. I think that would change it. But I think if all educators kind of work together, and administration, we can really make some changes. And I think that definitely has to happen in the minority communities and things like that.
Yep. I think it's so interesting because I feel like teaching is a labor of love. We're not getting paid like billions of dollars to do this, and a lot of the times we're dealing with some really unnecessary frustrations. And so one of the things that has been probably a constant theme when I talk to teachers, just in general, and not necessarily on the podcast, but just in general, is like this idea that like teaching is something where you get to help shape the future, right? And I think that expression is kind of triggering for some people now because I don't know. There's all this talk about indoctrinating children and whatnot, when really there's no indoctrination. It's more just like, teaching facts. Like these things happened, and they happened this way. And it's so frustrating right now with, the conversations on critical race theory and don't say gay. It's like literally people trying to wipe away the lived experiences of minorities in education. And so it's interesting because the solution to it is for teachers to help build the future. You know what I mean? But that's the very thing that, some parents are getting upset about right now, is this idea that we're doing things that are impacting the character of children. And I also find that really interesting. I live in Texas, and we do have we have trainings required by the state of Texas that talk about pronouns. And then 2 years ago, maybe it was the last school year, not this school year, but the last school year, there was a huge backlash across the state of people being frustrated that teachers were talking about pronouns. And it's required by the state for us to take these classes. And we're also required to be responsible for students' social emotional learning, which is directly tied to character building and who they are as people. So I find it so interesting that there's all of these things that we're getting pushback on, but it's literally a part of the job. And so why are we the targets? We don't make the policies. Most of the policies we hate, in fact. Those ones I like, but most of the policies I am not here for from, departments of education.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you mentioned that. I was in Florida the other day. I'm like, a couple was walking because my mom, lives in the community and stuff like that in Florida, and just by she was just talking to the lady, the wife, was saying about, what's it called with the drag queens and and also stuff and banning that, whatever. I think that's great, and I'm just and it's just it's triggering because I'm a teacher, she doesn't even know anything about my background and everything. But it's just it's scary. It's very scary, and especially teachers, what they're going through in Florida. I feel like all of us need to, start getting some petition signs and really support this whole, just to erase all the stuff that they're trying to take away, that we worked really hard for, as educators to, especially with LGBT history and Black curriculum. And, it's, it's just a very scary time right now. But all teachers just got to join together. I agree with you 100%.
I saw a video the other day online that was basically somebody who was conservative trying to describe woke and how that term gets thrown around a lot. And it was woke is, when people create this story of oppression. And I was like, create? How do you not see that these stories exist? That they are real stories that people are telling, and I will gladly be called woke. I don't use the term myself, but go ahead, call me that. If being woke means that I'm here talking about how we shouldn't be oppressing people, I am all here for it. What is your problem?
Yeah, right. That's so true. I agree 100%. Yeah, but even with this platform that you have, I think it's phenomenal for folks to listen to, and I hope it gets more parents and educators involved, more.
I hope so too. Yeah. I'm gonna be doing some big pushes in the next couple weeks for the next season, for the next school year. So, have you ever dealt with parents who have had anti-LGBTQ conversations or situations arise within your content area? You've shown a trailer that features queer students and then are queer characters, and all of a sudden parents are emailing or whatever. Have you gotten to experience this? You and I are relatively new to teaching. We both started about 5 years ago. So what has your experience been like with parents?
Yeah, it's weird. I haven't had any issues, and that's ironic. I've had issues maybe with a student with like a grade, or a student having issues, in a classroom, but never I've had, and I've even done, we did a documentary series during the pandemic. It was for a Black LGBTQ doc series, and it was like catered to all the, Black community, the LGBTQ that have changed, in history, and, iconic people like, Sylvester and all these different, singers and stuff like that through time. And nobody said, yeah, nobody's like, the administrators were, for it. The students wanted to be involved, and we've also had one time, two, queer parents, and one of the students, I was doing a film camp, younger grades and stuff, and he said, oh, my moms are outside, whatever, and the kids were like, they didn't say anything, but it was like a silence, and I'm like, oh, that's great. I'm like, and I even said hello to them, the parents outside,
Mm-hmm.
dropping them off, but yeah, it's just, but as teachers, like, being an advocate and just talking to them, and showing them like, hey, it's there's nothing wrong with that. It helps with the other kids too, to kind of, because everything with kids, like a sponge, like, they're seeing everything that you do in the classroom as a teacher. If I'm, half awake class, they'll know, Mr. Are you okay? You're tired today. So, but they, know all your mannerisms, and they just, focus a lot on you. And so if you as a teacher advocate for that other student, they might be in a situation in the lunchroom and somebody does something to, and they'll do the same thing that you cut it because you taught them that in the classroom, in terms of, being, supportive to everybody, so yeah.
That's great. Awesome. I'm glad. And it also sounds like you've got a pretty supportive administration.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In my school, yeah, in terms of, we have a GSA, it's called the Breakfast Club, and it's in the morning. The only thing I would say, and it does have to be in the afternoon, 'cause it's a little bit early. It's like at 7 o'clock.
So,
Like,
I do not want
and
to
I
get
don't
up
think
that
kids really
early.
get up. I don't think kids, wake up that much. They're usually just there at the bell, like getting to at the high school. But it's a start, in terms of the organization and kids getting involved, and even in my classroom, we're working with other, LGBT organizations in Newark, and doing commercials for the film program, and helping out, doing advocacy work, and so yeah, in terms of that, I have to say they've been very accommodating and supportive, with that, for the students. So
I
yeah.
love that you incorporate LGBTQ topics into your curriculum. Can you tell me a little bit more about the documentary? Like who were some of the people that you
Oh
featured?
yes. Oh my God. Okay. So we did, there was, Sylvester, because I started listening to him, so I kind of picked a list of different people. Oh my God. And if because we did it during like the pandemic, but folks that like political leaders, who else, do we have? And we also talked about just, and what I would do is have people within, like, New Jersey area. So we would have a teacher talking about that specific, person. And I would give them a list and say, like, which one do you want to pick? You want to do, Marsha P. Johnson, or you want to do, other people. And they'll be like, okay, I'll do this, person. And they'll talk about it. And the kids will find like photos on Google and like add it to the video and add some music in the background. And then they would ask them specific questions like, what does this person mean to you? And what role do you have, in the community, and, what kind of advocacy work you've been doing. So it was like a doc series I just came up with. It was during the pandemic, and then it kind of just like everybody was getting involved. The president, from the Garden State Equality, he wanted to be involved in it as well. And but this year I'm gonna try my best to get it together. This year, because sadly I had to take, the leave of absence. I had to have surgery, so I couldn't do it this year for Black History Month. But next year, 100%, school year, I'm gonna do it like the next season. But it was fun. The kids liked it, especially kids that like illustration. They were able to add their photos in there. I collaborated with, the dance teacher next door. She did pose, in terms of like the pose, movement, and, what's it called, with like Madonna, and like all the,
Voguing,
we kind of just
ballroom.
made a lesson. Yes, voguing, yes. And she did, I recorded her lesson in the classroom. She was talking to the students, and the kids asking questions, and then we added like photos and stuff, and the kids were dancing in the videos. And it was really neat. So it's good to have that collaboration with other teachers, with that
That's
project.
awesome.
So
Last year, I think I was asked, for us to do, historical character, or not characters, but people for, I think LGBTQ History Month, which I believe is October. Um, and so I was naming off these people, and the first ones were, like Marsha P. Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, and I literally got, like, they didn't go through with the project because the first two people I put, they focused on the fact that they had to work as sex workers. And I was like, okay, but what about the facts that they were trans women in the 50s and 60s? Like, how do we have that conversation? Because we are more than just one tiny part of our identity. And I think that's the hard thing, is that so many people have been boxed into, this is what my identity is. And it's like, one thing, I'm a Christian, I'm gay, I'm a baseball fan, like whatever the one thing is, and that, like, this is who I am, except for we're all kinds of different things. Every person has a kaleidoscope of different elements. So why are we all so focused on just like this one thing? Drag queens are performers. It's a part of their job. Why is that the focus as opposed to the rest of their life? What happens the other 22 hours of the day because they perform for maybe 3 hours of it?
Yeah, that's right. It's true. And it's like, it's nothing. It's all, and it's very innocent and stuff like that. It's like, you seeing like a show or going to like a Broadway show, it's kind of like, yeah, it's sad that people kind of like focus on that. And, and I don't understand why they would want to take it away. It's just crazy.
I'm also like, parents have the right to take their kids to things. Like, there are ratings on movies, but a parent can still take their children to those movies. You know what I mean? Like, you still have a right as a parent. So what is it doing saying, like, if a parent wants to do this, it's their choice. They know their child. They know what they're taking their child to. So it's a very interesting time we're living in. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the conversation. We've got two questions to kind of end the podcast. The first one is, what advice would you give to a brand new teacher who may not know whether or not to be their authentic self in the classroom?
That's a great question. I would say the only advice is, be yourself, and also, don't be afraid in terms of like the content of the projects you want to, incorporate in the classroom, because you never know the students that are in your classroom, that might be a part of the LGBTQ community and, as a whole, that, if you don't understand, like, that is like, in terms of like seeing them and like especially the content that you have in the classroom, you don't know what that does to them. It basically makes them feel included, and like, and the things that the kids are exposed to in terms of, nowadays, like we talked about, suicide rate going up and everything else, it's, the impact that you're giving them in the classroom speaks volumes. So just know your worth, know that you are valuable. I know it's hard that, nowadays we're like overworked and exhausted and all the other stuff. But just know there's also other teachers out there just like you that are, just a part of the whole good fight. And yeah, just like, just keep yourself in terms of inclusion going, and, in the classroom, and being an advocate for them. That's the advice I would give to, a newcomer.
Awesome. And then the final question is, what can parents, teachers, and students do to help move the needle towards inclusivity for LGBTQ people?
Oh, yeah, I would say, in terms of parents and, a lot of times I feel like, as teachers, really, like, we're the ones kind of seeing them a lot more often than the parents. They drop them at school. They're there with them for, like, the weekends or after in the evening. But, they don't realize that they have a lot of power. They could be able to, help change, the cycle as well, or even help out at the school, in terms of joining the PTA or, any type of like after school program or whatever. But in terms of like, it could be a parent that has a student, that is a part of the LGBTQ community as well. We have to be advocates for them. But, I think parents just need to be involved be more supportive, I think, because I've been hearing some also controversy, especially at the board meetings. A lot of parents are like, lashing out a lot of times at the educators, or, especially with this whole thing that's going on. Yeah, just to kind of keep an open mind and know that, like, teachers are here for your kids, and, like, we're advocates for them and helping them, during their career, journey or educational journey. But just know that, LGBTQ curriculum, Black education, things like that are very important, and helping them shape them to the people that, they grow up to be. So, I think that parents just have to work hand in hand, I think, with educators as well, and administration, and definitely, go to those meetings, go to the board meetings, learn about what's going on, and see how you can be able to be a service and support with that, so hopefully that's a good
Oh, I
message.
love that. I think that get involved is a huge thing, because who's getting involved is the people who might have a different opinion from you. But if we don't hear from both sides of the situation, then the school boards are not going to make fully educated decisions, right? So I love that. Get involved. Hey, Danielle, thank you so much for spending the afternoon with me. I really appreciate it. It's a gorgeous day here in Texas, so I hope it's a gorgeous day there in New Jersey.
Yeah, we finally had some sunshine after, like, rain and everything.
Awesome.
Good day.
Well, thank you, and thank everybody for tuning in to this episode of Teaching While Queer. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Teaching While Queer. If you're enjoying the episodes, please leave a review wherever you are listening to our podcast. Check us out on Instagram at Teaching While Queer. And if you're interested in being on Season 2 of Teaching While Queer, please visit teachingwhilequeer.com. Have a great day.